Kwabas non konde ba RAZ Media GH so ewo YouTube. Abusia ene Miracles Dennis Aboagye after the D-Day elections no wababonten abechirechire nsembinum the ordinance enam so a ema sabio Dr. Alhaji Muhammad Bawumia edi nkukuo na Miracles ne nsem na odigu abonten no the original so pa ne say Dr. Bawumia was just a victim to a situation na ewo party num na odinsem ahodo egu abonten even ashoko the Joy News reporter Yefeni Samsilate on how intellectually Miracles Aboagye expressing ho on the issues the Dr. Alhaji Muhammad Bawumia nkukuo die no nti meselo sabusia yenko nkotie the explanations Miracles Aboagye ede aba abeto abonten na yeba yasan ato so wadwen e comment section box for makraw.
So as we it was around this time last week, people had queued and voting had begun like an hour, and there were hopes, particularly in your team. Of course, many were unsure what will happen. By close of day, we saw what had happened. How are you processing that?
Well, something. Let me first of all congratulate the President-elect, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, and the NDC party. I think that to run a campaign that long it's no mean an activity. It's a lot of work, and so if you eventually come out victorious, it's a big deal. It's unfair if anybody tries to downplay that victory. You know, so I think they've done a very good job by unseating our government and coming into power, and I really congratulate them for that. This is what the results that we expected from the MPP side. We were quite optimistic that, considering the prevailing situation that the country finds itself across sectors, and looking at the propositions that we had made, we believed we had superior...
The bold solutions.
Yes, we believe we had superior propositions to confronting these issues than the NDC did. And so we were quite confident that the people would accept it and then give us an opportunity to roll out those, propositions in dealing with these issues. But I think that people think otherwise. They think that maybe the options that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama brings to the table could deal with their issues than the options that we brought. And so they've taken a decision, and it's an emphatic one for that reason. You recall in 2016 when we won by 1 million, we thought it was historic. In fact, people thought it's not something anybody could repeat.
That's right. The president will, say it anytime he had the opportunity.
Civil society, political watchers. It was difficult for you to imagine a repeat of that. And so to realize around 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m. that we're actually losing by not just 1 million, but 1.6 million. It was a big shock. It was a big shock.
Right. So you say John Mahama won deservingly because he has spent quite some time in the campaign. So no one should try and downplay his victory, correct?
I mean, if you win an elections as intense as this one, and anybody tries to downplay it, it's unfair. I wouldn't be happy if it was the MPP that won these elections and anybody tries to downplay it. No, I mean, we're in the same industry. We know what it takes to win an election. You may disagree with the strategies and style, but an election has no replay. Once a person wins, is won. And I think that we need to give them that credit, and we need to give the former president that credit. It's a big deal.
Right.
You lose an election by 1 million, and then you come back 8 years later and win by 1.6 million. That's a big deal. I mean, personally, for him as a person, as a politician, it's a huge achievement.
Right.
And if he used to write a book, post his presidency this final term, I think it will be with some great pride, for him to put that together. And that recognition and that acknowledgement, I think nobody should.
So when members of your party and Dr. Bawumia say that it's your people who didn't come out to vote, so you gave away the election, that's not fair to John Mahama.
No, they are not the same. They are not the same. They are not the same. There could be what John Mahama did right that ensured our people didn't come out to vote. You understand? So let's not confuse the two. Indeed, the reason, one of the key reasons why this result is as it is per the data is because our people didn't turn out to vote. And that's fact. But they are not the same. Why the people didn't turn out to vote has its own reasons as well. But that doesn't take away, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is not in any way saying that to take away the credit or to acknowledge the feats that His Excellency.
And when you say you gave it away, it means that the person didn't exactly win it on his strength.
It could also mean that you didn't do enough to be able to hold on to it. You understand? Because whilst you give your opponent the credit, you're also going to look at why it happened the way it happened. You understand? And so your opponents may have done something absolutely right. I mean, your opponents may have infuriated your followers. He may have triggered the emotions and sentiment of your followers, in a superior way. He may have found ways to suppress your followers to turn out.
What do you say to those who say that kind of analysis is completely wrong, that it is your people who didn't come out, so you gave these elections away?
The data is there. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the data. If you put the
2020
emotions aside and you pick the data and you analyze it, let's look at and each of the regions, all the regions. You look at Ahafo region. In 2020, MPP had 145,000. 2024 113,000. NDC had 116,000. 2024 had 130,000. In Greater Accra, MPP had 1,253,179. Something note, 1,253,179. NDC had 1,326,489. In 2024, MPP had 681,000. Half of what we did in previously. And then NDC almost remained at the same 1.2, 1.3 million. So you see, if the 600,000 from NPP had gone to NDC, and for example, NDC is reading 1.8, 1.9 million, then you can easily see that these 600,000 have moved from the MPP and gone to vote for John Dramani Mahama. I don't know if you are getting the
what happens when you factor in the turnouts?
Yeah, I mean, that is what it is.
Because the turnout last in 2020 is not the same turnout today.
The turnout is actually what is pointing to these analysis. So you look at the turnout and you realize that your strongholds, areas and places where, according to data, would vote for you, every 10 persons that vote, maybe 7 or 8 will vote for you, are not coming. Then it's pointing to the same direction.
Shouldn't the turnout also suggest that it's not really about your people not voting, but it is really the case that as many as turned out, the majority wanted John Mahama?
So you can make that assumption, but the other assumption that is also being made is true. And so if you compare the two, the one that has a lot more of factual basis is the one that you look at your strongholds to do the analysis. So each of the assumptions could be possible. However, if I'm getting low turnout in Latte, where you know that when 10 people turn out, 8 will vote, and you are getting high turnout in whole Central, where you know that when 10 people vote, 9 will vote for the NDC, then the initial assumption we are making is a stronger one. So we are not discounting the other assumption as well. But which one is it?
The NDC suggests strongly that they were successful at breaking a certain rigging machine that has always been in play, particularly in Ashanti. and this is why the NPP didn't make as much.
So again, you know, when you win a contest, you cannot be faulted for saying all these things. And to be very honest, I don't want to take the excitement out of the NDC. I'm a fair player.
Okay.
It's okay. They should be suppressed. You know, all of that. Perfect. So they couldn't suppress in 2016. That's why we won. I mean, right. They couldn't suppress in 2020. We pray they are able to suppress in 2028, 2032. We are all improving. So congratulations to them. But these things are being said by them because they have won. And at this point, you have lost. Any attempt you try to discount these things that they are saying is basically making you look very sour. However, that is flawed. It's flawed because these are human beings who have registered legitimately. And the evidence is that they came out to vote in the last four years elections, but they didn't show up to vote in these elections. So you could not have suppressed any rigging machine. That cannot be correct. Maybe you can make a point that you suppress the turnout of your opponent followers in the strongholds. That is a political strategy that can be deployed. That you manage to suppress the turnout, that you can influence people. Politically, you can unleash propaganda in your opponent's strongholds to get them not to come out. I remember in 2008, I was a young student who was doing national service. We went to Volta region. Remember the Damotri scenario in the Volta, when a chief announced that he had declared all MPP persons in one of the communities personal and gratis, and everybody ran. In a situation like that, yes, you have actually suppressed turnout by the MPP, but surely not a rigging machinery. So for you, I'm looking for anybody that can prove that in this country, apart from the fact that you use brute force to maybe take pink sheets from people like it's happening now, Bennett, you can rig an election. It's not possible. Our election is not electronic. Our election is very, very, very manual. Even apart from the fact that we are doing using biometric, if you look at it critically, it's extremely manual.
In the course of time, we'll interrogate. I mean, sometime in the year, or maybe next year, we'll be interrogating what the NDC says it discovered ballot boxes stashed in a certain place.
Let me address that matter even before let me address it. It's false. So first of all, we should not allow people to continuously play on our minds. I think I addressed that issue in one of the press.
Yes, you did.
Some said EC has a ballot paper, and then political parties have sample ballot papers. Political parties, MPP, NDC printed millions of sample ballot papers. First of all, that ballot paper,
print them in the millions.
Oh yes, because you have to use to sort of educate people. First of all, that ballot paper Yamin was standing by, when you look at it, it's not the EC ballot paper. It's a dummy ballot paper. That is the first thing. So it doesn't make sense for anybody to go and stand in a room somewhere, make a call and say, I found ballot papers. When indeed that ballot paper is not even an EC ballot paper. No serial numbers, no similar designs. Sometimes we spend so much of our quality time.
Was that your story?
No, it's actually theirs. And that's even established. So what Yamin did was that, and it's all part of the strategies. What Yamin did was that along the line, he realized that these people were turning against him. When he did his press conference and his own people attacked him and all that. So he needed to win some goodwill. So he goes into a certain room where he has his own sample ballot papers, picks a phone, making a call to whoever. They have a phone on him and says, I found ballot paper. You actually think and believe that Yamin got to know that there are legitimate electoral commission ballot papers in a house somewhere. And then he, on his own, with his own people, went into the room. He didn't put a camera on himself from outside the gate. When he was coming, he didn't do it. He waited to enter a certain room in a corner where you can't even see the window. You can't even determine the house number, and then places a call. Eventually, when it was checked by the Ashanti Region Police, they realized that it was his own, ballot papers. The owner of the house is known. The owner of the house doesn't even live in this country, and we know who those ballot papers. And indeed, those ballot papers are not even original EC ballot papers.
Okay.
But those are all
right.
Part of the scheme.
So yes, like I said, we'll be interrogating that further, but not on this platform today. I was talking about the turnout. So in 2020, we had 79% turnout, and this time we had 60.90 turnout. The NPP's explanation for that is why that turnout which went against you.
Well, I mean, it's very early days. What I gather from the leadership of the party is that surely there's going to be some, inquiries into what really transpired with this apathy and what caused it. But one of the easiest things to put your fingers on without doubt is the fact that our people were not happy with us, the government.
Why so?
Oh, I mean, you remember there are a series of issues, some of which I think that maybe we underrated the extent to which our people were unhappy. You remember when even our own MPs were making calls for certain changes in government and certain reshuffles and
the Pierre Kubi, Eugene Boachienchi, all of them are saying this, and some of your party members are also saying this was when you should have listened. You didn't. The president didn't listen. So they blame it on the president.
Absolutely. I mean, so there are facets of issues that, as a government, our people may not have been so happy about. Again, there is this issue of cost of living, which our campaign really made proposition to address. You can't take it away from the people. I always insisted that the entire economic conversation, what was most important to the people was the cost of living. And it is very, very difficult for you to explain or have a conversation on someone about cost of living. So if you are unable to deal with it before the person gets to the ballot, the rest assured that the person will punish you for it. So if this person doesn't want to punish you, there are some people in our strongholds who just don't see themselves ever putting their thumbs on a ballot for the NDC. So I will not go at all. I will not go. And they expressed it. In fact, on the day of elections, one of the things that was quite predominant, and some of your reporters will say, is people standing at polling stations and say, I'm not going to vote. It happened.
Showing up at the polling station and saying,
yes.
So why do you show up at the first place?
To spite you. We just want you to know that we are punishing you.
The president has been blamed, particularly in Kumasi, for telling a particular constituent that the chiefs were making demands, and he says, well, whatever it is, when you go to the polling booth, you vote for who you want to vote for. You are not forced to vote for who you want to vote for. And the people got angry and punished you for it.
Well, I mean, again, like I keep saying, definitely there was some anger in our people, without doubt. And that's clearly reflected in the ballot. I mean, one of the things that is quite clear in all this conversation, you realize that everybody seems to sympathize with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. It's like a candidate who's suffering from, who's a victim of circumstance. It's like sins being, brought upon him, which he has nothing to do with it. At a time when he's going on a mission of his own, and so he has a responsibility at this point to reach out to these people and say, I understand you've punished me for these sins, but shall we have a conversation? Shall we talk and see if we can heal these wounds and find a common path going into the future? His capability, his ability is not in doubt. His level of innovation is not in doubt. The fact that he's a leader that this country needs is not in doubt. But sometimes you can find yourself at the right place at the wrong time. and whether you like it or not, you have to face it. And clearly, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia has to face it. He's basically been punished for a lot of sins that he didn't commit.
We'll talk about whether he didn't have a role to play in this and that. In fact, this vote was a vote of no confidence in Akufo-Addo, a vote to spite him, a protest vote against him. But when I raised that issue, I wanted to bring up the question of what many are talking about, the arrogance of power. That a president who was begging for power suddenly could tell electorate that I don't care who you vote for, stop worrying me. How much of a role have you recognized that the arrogance of power played? It's also lost in Ablekuma West. people who don't vote in Ablekuma West have been jubilating.
Arrogance is a perception. It's very, very difficult for me to really make a determination on someone's arrogance or otherwise. I want to be very careful. Look at me. I'm a Capping boy, a Presby trained student, a Methodist. Some people may describe me as arrogant, but anybody that knows me knows that I'm not close to it. You understand? There's fine lines between confidence and arrogance. And in our country, it's very, very difficult. I'm very, very, very strongly opinionated. Like if I have something to say, I'll say it without holding back. You understand? It doesn't matter where, who. If I have to say, I'll say it. If I'm convinced about something, I'll stand by it. And if you don't take it, you'll be described as such. So I'm very, very careful when it comes to that. But those are individual decisions and individual appraisals. I don't think you can have 1 million voters going to vote based on that, indicator. People have various reasons why. What we can do is to identify the common ones, the ones that run true, and then we can use those ones to make a determination.
I think this runs true because when I interact with people in Ablekuma West, which is my constituency, many admit that they believe that Eslosu has the clout to be able to bring the development she's bringing to the place and she has done, and that Reverend Ado will not be able to match that, and yet they jilted her. The president, after winning office, suddenly began to tell CSOs that, get off, what do you know that my ministers and my appointees don't know? So this played a major part, didn't it?
I haven't done an appraisal. I will not be able to.
People's sentiments that I'm reflecting to you.
We always disagree with people on how they feel and how they. I mean, I'm sure by this time people are disagreeing with me on some of the things that I'm saying. It doesn't really represent the view of everybody, and I doubt, honestly speaking, Akufo-Addo by his persona and demeanor, if you're watching him from afar, the easiest take will be he's arrogant. But for anybody that has worked with him and been very close to him, including CSOs and you yourself, Samson, will disagree that he is not arrogant. He's, very strongly, he has very strong views and he sees them as it is and all of that. Sometimes your body language, sometimes your posture could send certain waves and signals, but it doesn't necessarily represent. I have worked with him as a presidential staffer. I don't think he's anywhere close to arrogant, but he's a very strongly, fisted person. He would say it as it is. If he disagrees with you, he will say it. If he has a disagreement with Samson, he will not come and say Samson is my friend. No, he will say it confrontationally, and so sometimes that interpretation.
If he's telling chief, if he's telling people who have suffered a catastrophe, like the spillage of the Akosombo Dam, he's telling them, you don't vote for me anyway, so what's it? Why should I be bothered about you?
In jest. Why do we
in jest?
Yes. Sometimes, Abba, Samson, when you people cry, all the things I've been doing for you, you don't vote for me, you don't vote for me, for the first time vote for me. Some say, how is this an issue? The person is already there anyway. He knows you don't vote for him, but he's already there to provide an intervention. And we are in the political season. So if the person tells you that after all the things I've done for you, don't vote for me, how is that an issue? Haven't you had politicians say all this? Does it make them arrogant? The former president told a similar thing to the Ashanti region. I don't think he's arrogant. You understand what I'm saying? And I actually don't think that if I come to your constituency and I've given you first class roles, I've given you millions of dollar markets, and you're still voting against me, I shouldn't tell you. And if I tell you, it doesn't make me arrogant. You understand? But like I'm saying, if we had won these elections, all these analysis would have happened. But once we've lost, we should accept these analysis and have conversations around them. Maybe yes, maybe not. But eventually when we really sit down and complete our introspection, we identify them and we avoid some of these things moving into the future. We only grow in.
So what's your story? The bottom line of your story is that your people didn't come out to vote. You're going to work on them for the next election.
So two things. We have to work on our people to let them understand the circumstances under which each of their issues and sentiments transpired the way it transpired. Secondly, we have to learn from this experience and realize that you may be right, but maybe you have to find a different way to handle it. So those are the things going into the.
What are some of the learnings you're talking about?
I mean, there is this issue about the National Cathedral. You understand? You may be convinced about it. What if the people have punished you again? In the future, you learn from it and realize that if you are doing the thing for the people and they say they don't want it, when you call do an issue address and say, I have been trying to do this thing and the feedback I'm getting is that you don't want it. As a result of that, I've stopped. It's a big lesson we've learned.
So you know my record on the National Cathedral, my biggest problem at the beginning was the lies that were being told around it, that it was not going to involve government money, we will not put anything in it. Then we found out that the state was putting something in it. And everybody you speak to was in complete denial. Until later we heard that, oh, there's going to be seed money for it. We even went to the Supreme Court, and the Attorney General in his address tells the Supreme Court that the state was not going to be involved. And that convinced the judges, and they made a note of it, that in any case, it's not being funded by the state. So the questions of the location and all, what sort of learning do you think you can take from it?
I think communication is very important.
Advise you going forward.
Communication around such things are very important. I am very, very sure that maybe what government at that time, or the Attorney General, the Finance Minister, who I heard on several occasions driving and leading this project, maybe what they should have communicated from the get-go is that even though I'll be raising funds from, private individuals and corporate organizations, we want to start. We need to do demolition. We need to prepare sites, and for which reason the government will provide some seed money. But that is not what is going to actually execute the project. If we had, had the communication right, we wouldn't have been where we are at the moment. So maybe communication is also very important. Again, you learn from that also, because even from the stage of demolition, marking the site, demolition and all, I don't think the communication was handled right. And when you do that, you allow your detractors to take advantage and lead the conversation. So for me, the biggest takeout from the National Cathedral is the fact that we allowed people who obviously are political beneficiaries from whatever fallout of the cathedral to drive the conversation. So they will have to come out and say, hey, judges are being moved out. They will come and explain. They would have to come and say, hey, the design is like this. They will have to come and explain. They will have to come and say, hey, there's been a digging down and discussing this, why they will have to come and explain. If we had gone the other way around, I am sure we wouldn't have been where we are today.
Interesting. And when I first made the disclosure about how the judges were being moved out of the place, because I don't know how some people were thinking, because I work with judges and judges will speak to me, and I even got intercepted letters that showed that they were so, embarrassingly, in a way, unprepared, being moved out. And I spoke about how some of the buildings there were even still uncompleted, and most of them were new, and the narrative, even including from Peter Mawu then, was that, oh, these buildings are dilapidated. The information ministry, oh, they are dilapidated and we have to change them. That was all a big lie, because the dilapidated ones were just a few of them. Well, let's focus on you. Now, let's let's listen to you on the day of the elections.
So, on the day,
we will be having such periodic and rapid engagement with you, and the interest of transparency, and also reducing the very high level of misinformation and disinformation that our obvious losing opposition party is churning out. We are more than halfway through the process, and so far the turnout is very, very, very encouraging, and we're urging everybody that is yet to cast their vote to start moving towards your polling station and cast your vote. So far the process has been extremely peaceful. It's been very smooth and fluid, and we commend the Electoral Commission and the security services for a very good work done so far, and clearly we can all attest to the progress we are making in our electoral processes in this country. you can also realize that by virtue of the reduction of the sizes or the number of people who vote in a particular polling station, it drastically reduced the queues that we are usually accustomed with in previous elections, and that's something that we also commend the Electoral Commission for. We also see the swiftness with which the security services, the Ghana Police Service, is handling issues as they come up on a minute or per the hour. It is important for us to note that in spite of all of these things, we have experienced some delays in other polling stations, but I'm very sure the Electoral Commission would have a strategy in place to ensure that everybody in the queue gets to vote. And so we are encouraging our fellow citizens to move towards your polling station and get in the queue and exercise your rights. This comes but every 4 years, and you do not want to miss this.
Which of your press encounters first?
This was the first one.
This was the very first one.
First one.
And this was at what time?
This is, I think, around 11 a.m., 1 p.m. I can't recall. But this was the very early one. Okay. You know, what we did was to put out a plan to try and give, periodic briefing to the press. It was for a very good reason.
That's right.
You know, in the course of the day, there are a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of thuggery, a lot of confusion around. So the structure was for us to have that periodic update to clarify, explain, give updates as and when we receive from our constituencies to the general public. And I think it really helped. So this was very early on in the day. So we had, I think, four press briefings in a day. I did 3 of them, and then the General Secretary did 1.
Right. At this time, you were very sure.
Yes, absolutely. Why not, Samson? I mean, could you have imagined 1.6 million?
Then it means everything would have gone wrong with your own systems. Because by this time, you ought to have known that it wasn't well.
Well, it was too early. It was very early. It was very, very early. This was barely about 3 hours into the votes. Yeah, it was
3 hours.
So you realize that in this statement, we're even asking people to get out and vote.
Yeah, so this one was around 11. At about 11 was your second one.
Okay, so
the one that you were flanked by Richard Ahiagba and
that was midnight.
Fatima.
That was midnight.
That was midnight.
Yeah. The okay. Richard and Fatima is midnight. That's the last one.
Okay.
That was midnight. This was very early.
Right.
This was at a time when we were actually calling people out. This was the first one.
And by the time you did the second one, you were still very sure midnight that you were winning.
Because the vote hasn't been counted. You only know you are not winning when the vote has been counted.
Around the same time in 2020, we had screenshots, figures from the collation room or the election monitoring center
of the NPP.
So you ought to have known by then.
But let me ask something. When you are losing, you don't put out your figures. It is when you are winning that you put it out. So let me remind you, between 6:30 p.m. and 9 p.m., we were putting out our screenshots. I actually have some. It was on Facebook. It was put out. All the way up to about 12 a.m. We're still putting out the screenshots. But if you are losing, what are you going to put it out for? Something. Next time when you are losing an election, put yours out. As at 12 a.m., we're still putting out screenshots. And you could see that we were still leading.
Nana Kumia says you knew as early.
That's not accurate. I'm sure maybe he
says you knew as a campaign.
That's not accurate.
That you will lose.
That's not accurate. I mean, February we had just had our candidate for 2 months, so that cannot even be correct. That's not accurate. Unless maybe Nakuma is referring to the polls that were at that time. You know, as of 2022, it was a drastic loss. In fact, before Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was even elected, people were even wondering the kind of messaging we're going to put out and tell the people. So maybe that's what Nana Kumia is referring to. But February was 2 months after Dr. Bawumia's election. You couldn't have even done any proper polling on him anyway, so that cannot be correct.
So, you've heard a good number of your people. You've heard, I've referred to Boakye and the Apia Kubi, and most of them in the commentary, they isolate the president, they isolate Ken Ofori-Atta, and some even push it to Gabi Asare-Kyerema and the rest. Let's listen to this one too.
Doing a self-check and a reality check and improve upon themselves. They want to inflict upon the entire country the damage that they themselves have brought upon themselves, and they want us to all live in it together. That is what we are not going to allow. And we want to thank every single Ghanaian, every single citizen of this country, both those within and without, those living abroad, for working together with all the institutions, and disgraceful manner that you can expect from a political party. They are calling on their supporters at this hour. Elections are over. The supporters were supposed to mobilize the people and get them to their votes, their polling stations, and cast their votes. That is what political parties do. Simple process. Campaign, encourage your supporters to canvass for you, get the voters to go to the polling station, cast their vote for you. Everybody in the full glare of the public, the counting is done at the polling station.
It must be a very difficult job. This is not the sound I was calling for, but it must be a very difficult job for you. That at this